City School District Board of Education and the Provo City Council. And we are meeting today at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We're going to begin our meeting today with a roll call, and if you don't mind, well, Travis, you just took a bite, so never mind. I was going to start with you. We're going to start over here instead and let you chew.
Meg Van Wagenen, board member.
Gina Hales, board member.
Devin Daly, business administrator.
Wendy Dow, superintendent. Jennifer Partridge, board vice president.
Rebecca Nielsen, board president.
Catrice McKay, council chair.
Rachel Whipple, council vice chair.
George Handley, city council.
Lisa Boyce, school board member.
Gary Garrett, council member.
Becky Bogdan, city council member.
Terry McCabe, board member.
Travis Hoban, council member.
Thank you, Travis, for being nice and loud. We appreciate it. Okay, and is there a motion to convene our joint board and city council meeting today?
I move that we convene our joint Provo School Board and Provo City Council meeting.
Thank you so much. Motion made by board member Hales. Is there a second?
I second that.
Second by board member Partridge. We're now officially in our meeting. Okay, we have a tight timeline today and a great agenda, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start today with item number 3. We're going to have a discussion regarding general updates from the school board, including restructuring, a sidewalk update on 200 West. And so, Wendy, if you don't mind starting that off for us, giving us an update on the restructuring.
Sure. As I met with every single school faculty, administrative team, just kind of working with every single department, we noticed a lot of things that were taking place in the district that we needed to fix. So one of the major complaints that we had was that our district office operates very much in silos, and that there isn't a lot of communication and support that goes out to the schools, that in fact schools were getting conflicting information from individuals within the school district, and that they felt like, principals felt like that they had multiple supervisors when they in fact only have one. Teachers expressed significant concern about behavior in their classrooms and the fact that principals were overwhelmed in terms of dealing with those behavior issues, and they weren't able to support teachers effectively with instruction. And we have what are known as facilitators because of our UVU and BYU partnership, but those individuals are really slated towards helping the interns and the student teachers and not teachers as a whole. We are a district that is in improvement with the state, which means we are one of the bottom performing districts in the state. And so with that, we need to make some significant structural changes to push the instructional levels and the performance of our students to a higher level, and make sure that the instruction that they're getting in every single classroom is rigorous and of high quality, and that we are supporting the teachers in that process. So part of that was a restructuring of our cabinet. We reduced our cabinet by 2 assistant superintendents, and we are not replacing those positions. One individual retired. We reassigned another individual into a different position. And really everything goes through our assistant superintendents over elementary and secondary education, because those are the direct supervisors of the schools. So now we have a format of communication where everything goes through those 2 individuals in the hopes that our principals are not getting conflicting information. We went through every single department. We've eliminated several assistant director positions. We took our teaching and learning department and reduced them by 2 director positions, and just did some things to put in place more coaches that could be out at the schools, because those coaches are really critical towards improving the instruction of our teachers overall. So we didn't, at every single elementary school, we now have a principal. We do have an assistant principal. That represented an increase in 9 assistant principals across the district, because we already had 4 of our elementary schools that had assistant principals. The facilitator position was just converted over to an instructional coaching position. So that's not an added position. And now they're going to help with all teachers, but this principal is the supervisor of those individuals, and they're trained by teaching and learning and by our Title I directors. So the goal of this whole process too, many individuals may ask questions like, well, why would you add an assistant principal? Why wouldn't you give that FTE to the school for an additional teacher? That's a very valid question. The assistant principal, with all of the new requirements from the state, with the school safety bill, a principal just can't do all of those jobs on their own. They need to have an assistant principal that's in place now that we have to have armed guardians in every school at all times. And those different components, our assistant principals can help with that, and they also help extensively with behavior. So our middle schools, we didn't change really anything except we converted the second position. They were called PBIS coaches. We converted that to an assistant principal. So both of our middle schools now have a principal, 2 assistant principals, and our high schools all have 4 full-time assistant principals rather than having dean of students. It's just not ethical to ask individuals to be working as much as they are, not compensating them appropriately for that work with all of the supervision and support that they have. So I think overall what our goal was to push that support out to schools. That money had been sitting in the district office and we reallocated it out in that way. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
What about on the teacher level? I heard that teachers are losing their aides. Is that true? Or are we increasing aides? Are we losing aides? Where's that at?
It's a great question, and I think Devin will be talking a little bit more about that when she talks about the budget. So one of the things that has been happening is we've had federal dollars that have come in through COVID emergency dollars. As our enrollment has dropped as a district, and Devin will talk more about why that has occurred, then what happens is over that course of that 3,000 plus student drop, we've lost $13.5 million of revenue. So we've used that COVID funding to kind of help ease that. So we've been trying to ease people off of that funding over time. And so as a result of that, the way the state funds us is for every 27.5 students, we get the equivalent of an FTE. So that's how we're allocating that out to the schools. And then the instructional aides we just read through all of the school improvement plans for every single school. Those are all due. They're going to go before the board for final approval. They get to use what's called TSSA money and land trust money to help subsidize, and the school has complete jurisdiction over how that money is used with support from the school community council. Some principals have used that to pay for extra teachers, others use it to pay for aides. But we used to have that ESSER money, and Devin will speak more to that, that would allow a school to have, say, 20 additional aides. Now it is being reduced significantly. You are correct in that.
13 million per year that you've lost, or 13 million since COVID?
So with the funding for students is based on a per student. So this year it's about $4,900 per student that we receive. So when you drop down 3,500 students, you multiply 3,500 by 4,000 back when we lost them originally, and that is an annual amount that we lose.
Any further questions regarding the restructure? Nope. Okay, great. There was one more item here on item number 3, which was just a quick update for the city council on the sidewalk that was requested on 200 West. We just wanted to give just an update on that. And I'm not sure if we were clear last time. We talked about it just a little bit, but we are still using the property there for our softball fields for Timpview High School, and we're not ready to make any changes yet until the softball fields are moved back to Timpview, and then we can put that sidewalk in. And that was kind of the holdup on what was happening there. So we don't have sidewalks there yet. It's in our scope of things we need to do, long-term plan, but we're not ready to do that quite yet until we can get the softball fields out. So does anyone have any questions on that? I know it was asked about last time. We just wanted to be more thrilled about that information. Go ahead.
Yeah, so when do you think the softball will move over?
So that's a great question, because we are currently finishing our first phase on Timpview, and we are getting very close to having the softball fields move when that first phase is over, if we decide not to continue on with more construction on Timpview High School. So that's a little bit of a discussion we've been having, trying to decide if we want to go ahead and continue right into phase two, or take a break and then do phase two in the future. So that's undecided point.
What's the timeline for that decision?
That decision is happening fairly soon. We're working on getting some drawings from our architects and numbers and all those kinds of things, and trying to decide if it's something we're willing to go forth with now, financing, all of those things. So, I mean, we're looking at another month or two before we know if we move ahead with that.
Talk about this more in number 5.
Also on our number 5.
Oh, okay.
So we'll hit that as well. Yeah.
Fine. I should have read the agenda. I was going to bring up number 5.
Okay. So that's the update on the sidewalk. Anyone else with any questions on the sidewalk there? Okay, great, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 4. This is going to be a discussion regarding general updates from the City Council, including truth in taxation and progress on the dog poop efforts. This ought to be a fun item.
Love it.
We have allotted 20 minutes for this, so we will continue on this until about 12:33 is what we have on the agenda, but 20 minutes.
Okay. I don't think there's much to say in regards to, we have not come to any consensus as a council on truth and taxation. So that's something that's still undecided. Have you guys decided that for yourselves?
We have no plans to do truth and taxation
Okay.
this August. So
Okay.
do you have a timeline on when you may know if you're?
When do we look at it? June?
Well, we have to decide before the budget's approved, so it's actually really quickly, I think, in a month, we have to make a
I
decision.
guess during the 1st of June that
I
we
mean,
have to.
I think it's fair to say that we have never talked about, we've never contemplated anything more than what we've done in the past, approximately, something around the
3%
cost of
inflation.
living increase, but, yeah, we haven't had a final vote on that. But as I recall, the timing on that has to be, we have to declare that's our intention before June, sometime before the
Like 1st of
budget
June-ish.
deadline is in June, and then we have to decide definitively by the end of the summer.
I was just about to ask, like, what are your budget concerns? Is it certain more needs you're trying to meet, or is it just inflation? Like, what are some of the discussions you guys are having?
We've been
regarding those
having
things?
our budget meeting so far, and inflation is enormous, right? You guys probably see this with the construction of your high schools. We have projects that were supposed to be 4 million that are now 19 million. You know what I mean? It's just from our CIP from originally when they were, I mean, it's insane. So wastewater stuff, sidewalks, what are some of the other, Gary?
We do know that our sales tax revenue is down about 2 million so far.
Yep, so sales tax is down.
And we have continued public safety needs with police and fire.
We're always behind about, 7 to 11 officers at all times. Do you guys think of other concerns that, or budget things that we're gonna have we need a parking official? I mean, I don't know, there's multiple things that we're looking at, but, and obviously you guys know about the sidewalk thing, that's a constant battle. In regards to that, we are addressing our utility transportation fee. And the utility transportation fee is something that's on everybody's utilities, where we're in a city that's 52% nonprofit. Property taxes are an issue, and so this fee is another way to capture some of our nonprofits, and they can contribute to the roads they use. And that's something we're looking at. We're going to do a full study on that this year, because our fee is considerably lower than other cities. For example, there's cities that do $15 per single family home, we do $3. So there's a significant difference there. And it is something where we could look at extending that utility transportation fee to sidewalks and not just roads. But we just need to do a study on that and see what our actual costs are and what the usage is of these nonprofits and everyone, not just nonprofits, but the usage of everybody. And then, it has to be a fee that is in correlation to their actual use of the roads and sidewalks. What was the other item? Dog poop, yes. So we're going to start our big campaign this Saturday up at Slate Canyon. The council office will be up there with our posters and we're going for education, right? We're really, really pushing education. We have heard from principals and janitors at your schools that they are frustrated. An interesting thing, so just recently, Salt Lake City School District completely closed off all their schools so that dogs, people cannot get on their property at all. They can't use the tennis courts anymore. They can't use the fields. And dog poop was one of the things noted in why they did this. So this isn't just us, but we need to get a handle on it somehow. So we have increased enforcement as far as tickets. So it's definitely gotten the attention of people from that. And then we're really working on the education. The mayor's going to do her blog is going to be focused on the dog issue. As I said, City Council is going to be at multiple events to educate people on that, whether it's like the farmer's market or the Slate Canyon cleanup or different community events that they can come and educate people. We're going to do it on our social media. And so yeah, that is our angle. It's a hard thing to catch, right? The enforcement is so difficult to catch them when they don't pick up their poop. Like you have to be like right there. So we've gotten some, and that's gotten some blowback, but it's had the desired effect. Like people are aware of it. So, anyone else have comments on that?
Well, there are also ongoing discussions about how we better serve those citizens with dogs. Dedicated dog parks, access to city parks. So that discussion is also ongoing.
And we're going to have that this Tuesday. Some council members want to look into the idea of would it work to have off-leash hours in parks. So the Parks and Rec has gotten back to us, and we'll be discussing that on Tuesday. So yeah, that's to be determined.
And maybe you guys haven't done this, but some people have asked for the stations where they have the bags, and have we noticed any difference between parks or areas that have those versus parks or areas that do? I don't know what I think yet, if that would actually make a difference.
Do you know what? I know that we spend about $30,000 a year on those, on doggy bags. So the city spends $30,000 a year on that. So we have a lot of them, the trails, the parks. A new park just went in near my house, and it's interesting because it has a lot of those baggy, like 4 or 5 of them. But a girlfriend just texted me a picture. She picked up 9 bags of dog poop while walking around, even though the small park has 5. Right. So it's interesting. I don't know I have heard it does improve it. I've heard that on the trail from Parks and Rec. And I've heard that for some citizens who've requested them in certain places, and we've gotten them, and then I've received like follow-up emails saying, hey, it's improved. So I think it's just so hit and miss.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that when we did the Spanish language town hall, a woman who I think is a PTA member, if that's what it's called, I know.
Is that Ava from Franklin? She's brought it up many times.
Yeah, I think that was who it was. Anyway, I brought that to the attention of some of the city staff, and I think that kind of attention to individual specific locations that your people or our people identify as particularly problematic, that has been helpful. I don't know if that situation's been addressed to anyone's satisfaction yet, but I know that issue, we've had certain locations on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and certain parks where the problem seems more acute. And I think to the degree that we can be more aware of that, then that gives the police an opportunity to kind of do focused training and education and enforcement that hopefully turn the tide. I think it's just a slow slow turning wheel that eventually you get a cultural change, and then it kind of drops, right? It doesn't go away entirely, but it should be, 20% of the problem that it is right now if we get enough education and enough enforcement. But our problem is always that related to our public safety issue, we don't have enough police officers to have them be patrolling areas constantly. But if we can do sort of targeted, occasional ways of focusing on areas that are especially problematic, then hopefully that changes the general culture.
Quick question. I'm just totally curious. Do you guys have any stats yet on enforcement? Like how many tickets have been given? I know it's hard to catch, but I'm just curious how that's
We
gone.
did have that, was it like 7-ish, 7 to 11?
Yeah, I mean, there was like this really early enforcement
And this
effort,
was,
and then
like,
it kind of.
2 months ago, right?
Yeah, or
2
maybe
months
more
ago
than
we
that.
saw
Wasn't this back in the fall even? I feel like it was quite a while ago.
It might have been because I heard a parent who received one of those citations.
Yeah, I think there.
Sharing their feelings about that at a
Yeah.
district one meeting.
We kind of got ahead of I think the city staff, we were in the middle of talking about education and enforcement, and suddenly there was this wave of enforcement that we had not been told was coming, and then we got a bunch of emails, and then I think there was backing off of that and more education, and so
Like
the numbers were relatively
they were
small, but it was shocking
small.
enough that it
Got a response,
got a
right?
really heavy response.
And there were tears involved, like it was serious.
Yeah.
So, but it was, there was a few warnings and a few tickets. And the books have always been, the law's been on the books. This isn't a new thing. So, but we are lowering it from a misdemeanor to an infraction, because that was one thing that really, and that is extreme to have it as an immediately a misdemeanor. The problem is people don't pay their fees, and it never, so, but we've done it now where it will be an infraction. It won't be a misdemeanor till the third offense by the same person. So that seems more fair and reasonable. And that was one of the things those who were frustrated by the ticket requested, and that made perfect sense to us. So that'll go into place on Tuesday. So I don't have current numbers on that. Jennifer, could you make a note of getting current update numbers on that we can send out to the school board? Thanks.
Can I just ask to clarify, the tickets are given for not cleaning up poop and being off leash, is
Being
that right?
off leash.
Okay, or
Yep.
just off leash?
Both things are illegal.
Okay.
Being off leash and in a public space, right?
Yeah.
And not cleaning up poop. I don't know if any tickets have been given for the poop thing.
It's really hard to catch.
That's
Yeah,
a
that's
hard
why
catch
I
one.
was making sure I had it right, like, mainly are for the leash, right?
Poop and I see the dog.
I think they've all been off-leash issues, but it's funny, so we get citizens sending us pictures of dog poop, which I've never received before, but I receive a lot now, and it is shocking.
Yeah,
It's shocking. Like, I'm like, what?
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Can one more thing for the district. I do know many of our schools do have signs that say no animals allowed on the field. I mean, once again, it always comes down to enforcement. Is that something consistent across all of our schools, or is it school-based?
I don't know
Because like, I know Peaks has one, and I've had neighbors who have asked that to come down, like, hey, I'm a taxpayer, I should have access on off-school hours to let my dogs, because it's just open. And I think initially I'm like, yeah, but now listening to, this conversation, I'm like, yeah, but if we cannot collectively clean up after ourselves, the problem of the dog poop in our schools
And
is
there's been
great.
some, we've had a woman was jumped on and her hips broken when a dog made her fall, and we've had adults and children bitten, and you have other dogs have been killed by other dogs off leash. Like, they're just non-predictable.
Absolutely.
Now, are you guys looking at anything with with the Salt Lake thing? Are you guys looking at anything with your own situation with the school property?
I just was going to comment and say, obviously we can help and do our part as well. And so we don't have anything on our agenda specifically that we're ready to discuss, but I'm happy to we would love a partnership or something where we could work together on this. I know you're talking about an education campaign. So whatever we can do to help out, I think we would be happy to do, because I know it's a problem on our campuses as well, and we haven't had an official discussion, but we absolutely can and probably should. So however we can work together.
Do you know what? It would be great to have Jennifer's our media person to cook up with your media person, and we can share things across social media. I think that would be really effective.
That'd be awesome.
Because there's implications with children and stepping in it, and
Right.
the janitors
Health.
having to deal with more as a health stuff. Yeah, and it's a big thing with us with our watersheds, like in Rock Canyon and stuff, where we get all of our water from the ground. So.
As far as your question about are we looking at doing something like Salt Lake, we recently have put fences around our properties, and during the school day, our properties are closed to people who are not students and teachers, but we leave them open outside of the school day.
Any further comments or questions on that? Go ahead.
I do have the exact citation numbers. Michael actually just sent them to me. August 23 to January 24, there were 178 off-leash reports and 12 citations. Only 2 reports for dog poop and no citations.
So Oh, it's low. I mean, a lot of reports, but very low citation. And that was just through January, Jennifer?
August 2023 to January 2024.
Well, I have to say, I'm not a dog owner, but I have heard so much about it. So it's clearly, it's clearly on people's minds. So that's working, I think. So that's great. All right. Great. Well, let's go ahead and move on to item number 5 on our agenda. We're right on time, so this is great. We're now going to have a discussion regarding the some upcoming school district items. So we'll address our community nights, our boundary study, our safe routes to our new schools. And should I start, or do you have, Wendy, do you?
You start, go.
All right.
You're good.
We are planning a series of community nights that are coming up actually very quickly here. And I don't. May 1st is our first one. There's going to be 4. And the purpose of these community nights is to gauge the, I don't know if interest is the right word, but the willingness and the interest, and get the opinions from our community on a couple of items. So one of those items will be, of course, the Timpview construction that we were talking about. We'll be addressing the needs that we have across the district, and Timpview's second phase will be one of those needs. We'll also be addressing the needs we have with our soon-to-be vacated Dixon building, and getting input from the community on what they would like to see happen with that building there. Anything else I need to add on that?
Could we just explain a little more about Timpview and why we're
Absolutely.
looking at that?
So yeah, so those will be the 2 main topics. We'll be gathering input from the community, especially regarding what they'd like to see, and then also financing type options on how those can be accomplished. And the details on Timpview are as follows. Is there anyone who wants to address that specifically? Maybe Devin or?
I'm happy to.
Sure.
Okay.
So, in the construction of this phase of Timpview, it was discovered that some of the structural issues were a little bit more pervasive than what we had originally thought. So the recommendation has been made that the rest of the school is rebuilt now. And with those issues, some of them being seismic issues, we feel like it's probably at least worth talking about and getting a design put together and a timeline of what we can work on. Currently, our architects have given us 2 options, one to be done about 2 years from now, 2.5 years from now, and the other one to be done about 4 years from now. The one that will be done a little bit sooner is a little bit more expensive because we would have to put in some portable units and relocate students during the process. The other one would allow for construction while students are still in the building, and allow for less disruption, especially to those performing arts and the use of the auditorium at the school. So that is currently what we're doing. We're looking at the options, just like cities, on your general fund, you don't have a lot of options when you're building buildings. General obligation bonds are one of the options, and that is what we will always do first. Those are less money in the long run to taxpayers because you can get a better interest rate on GO bonds than on municipal building authority bonds, but that would also be an option depending on what the community members report at our community meetings, and what we get with the final evaluation of numbers and the needs at the school.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, yesterday I was talking with some parents, and really something that was helpful for me to learn so that I could then talk with them about some of their questions around this was some of the history that maybe everyone in the room knows better than I do, but since I'm new, which was really truly when the first bond did not pass with Timpview, we shortly thereafter had that earthquake, which caused enough of some damage and shifting that the insurance company said, you will lose your bond, your insurance rating, if you do not come with a plan that shows how you will secure this part of the school. And so that was why the funds were raised through a bond to do that one piece as part of a phased thing. And that as they were even recently looking into areas that had been damaged from that flooding, for example, they saw walls with unreinforced masonry. They found sinkholes under areas that were never actually going to be rebuilt. And now we have picture evidence and reports that say these buildings are unsafe. So now we have to move that conversation up with the public around, what is your tolerance for this and how can we do this? And if only this were the only, capital need in our district, as you understand, like, that would make this easier, I think, but there are other issues. So the point of these neighborhood meetings is actually to really hear from our neighbors. Like, we'll show you some of our capital needs and some of these issues, and then we want people to have questions, to push back where they need to ask all of those hard things so that we can do what we need to do. And we could wrap it up, right? We could close up phase that we're in of that construction, but we will know we're sitting with those other exposures to risk for our students moving forward. So I just want to be really clear about that, because for me, I wasn't super clear about all of it, honestly, and so I hear things like earthquakes, but then I'm skeptical when I look at like Provo High School still housing students for BYU now. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to be really clear around what I learned for why we're going to push this conversation out and gain as much info back from our community. And I hope anyone listening will start writing down all of those questions and concerns, and I think it'd be helpful to have them before those meetings even, so that we come prepared to answer.
I just wanted to say, our communications team is organizing a way on our main webpage where it'll have submit a question for those community meetings, so that they can just submit them ahead of time and also after the meeting as well. And then we'll just keep a running tally of all of that and make sure that that's all available to everybody on our website and in different formats, so that people have access to all that information.
And Lisa is exactly right. Oh, sorry, Meg, do you want to go ahead?
No, go.
When we originally started the whole process and went for the original bond in 2019, the intention was just to do that one area. The area that risk management said, and it wasn't just our bond, it was insuring our building at all. And so we needed to be able to have that insurability. And so there were plans to just put helical piers to try to stabilize the building. But there were some issues in that long term with the way that the building was settling. And the way that there's been questions about what will we do as soil settles in our new buildings. And part of that the building process of 50 to 60 years ago is a lot different now. There's a lot more soil samples, a lot more engineering work done on the front end and all the way through the process to make sure that the soil that is being used for the building and that the building will be sitting on is a long-term solution. And there's a lot more steel and the piers that are being used in the buildings as well. So, we were always intending for the next part to wait for a lot longer, but as some of those areas were exposed that could have some structural impacts long-term, the conversation at least has to start, especially because we know about it, and it creates a liability. So.
I was just going to add to both yours and Lisa's that moving the conversation as well is also trying to plan well, because the way the orientation of the next phase will be may be like, right, we were talking about, well, we're going to put a parking lot here where actually we might need, this is where we'll reorient some parts of the school. So would we do all that, tear it up, and then put the new portions onto that newly paved parking lot type of, that's also part of the conversation, right?
Correct. We want to make sure we're not doing the same work more than once, and making sure that we're utilizing the city funds, the public's funds well.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm new to the council, and it's very different being on this side of the decision making than the public side. And I've gained an appreciation for the complexity. I can tell you that when campaigning, I spoke with thousands of residents in District 1. So this is the heart of Timpview. And the biggest issue was the Timpview reconstruction. And in fact, as a candidate, I didn't know much. I mean, I knew as a public, I have to tell you, I didn't understand any of the things you're talking about. So as you think about communication for this next phase, I would encourage you to make it different in kind And the communication nights may be a good start, and that may be woefully inadequate, because there is such mistrust of, you know, a group of people going off and making decisions when the people clearly said no, and they went ahead and did it anyway. But when you start understanding the real complexity, and you're educated, you understand. So I would really encourage you, triple down on the communication.
Well, and if you have great ideas of how to get in touch with more people, because we did have community meeting after community meeting when we were doing the original
I wasn't
bond.
questioning that you did.
Oh,
I'm
and,
just,
and I wasn't,
I'm giving you the
but I
result.
just would love to have a better way of reaching out to more people.
That
because
actually
I-
leads into exactly what I was about to ask.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so if there are other ways, especially with the city assistance and neighborhood meetings, if there's a way we could get involved in some of that so that we can give the information, because that is one of the things that we deal with on a regular basis is the misinformation and the rumors that go around that people pick up on. And so it would be really helpful to have a little bit more information. We love the information. We have a lot of information. We would just love to share it with people.
And one of our constraints is for us to easily communicate, like we have emails of our students' families, but these decisions impact our entire community. And the majority of our community does not have students in our schools. So we are sending a mailer to let everybody in Provo know about these 4 meetings. But we were thinking ourselves, like, we wanted to touch base with you guys and see what you have a way to communicate easily with the entire city, and whether it's for this or for other future big things that impact our entire community, is there a way that we could utilize your ability to send out emails to everybody? Or
I can think of a couple things. Our neighborhood program, you know, we revamped it. It's really successful and it's doing well. And I think that utilizing a neighborhood meeting, and you guys can pick the place, like, you know, it wouldn't be at City Hall again, but you could do something at a school or that, where you could utilize our neighborhood program communication list and email, and Rachel Breen, who does that, in getting those districts that are involved at Timpview High School to a meeting just for them for this. I think that'd be very appropriate. And, I had another thought. Oh, please, like, I send out a newsletter to that area, like, send me stuff too that you have, and I'm happy to put it on my newsletter that I send out to the citizens a couple times a month.
You know, I have a thought that may not be very practically helpful, and maybe not be helpful in any way. But there's something about our messaging, and I say ours because I think we faced a lot of the same kinds of issues that I feel like has got to change to help communicate things a little more clearly to people with regard to the bonding and the cost of the schools and so on. And maybe this feels like a little finger in the eye to people who opposed the original bond, but I think it's important for people to realize what the cost is of not spending money down the road, right? And I think you can't hammer that enough, that because it makes sense if you, most people understand that concept when they're thinking about their own pocketbook and their own home economics. Like, how do you justify spending money on this car versus that car? Which car is going to have the better maintenance over the long term? Which one's going to therefore end up costing me more, even though it's a lower sticker price when I start? And that sort of logic, I think, is lost on a lot of people when it comes to city and school board kind of decisions, where they don't see the actual financial costs of holding back and not being willing to invest in the future. And I think if people caught a vision of what happened when we lost that bond in terms of what it's ended up costing us out of our pocketbooks because we weren't willing to spend more earlier, or some earlier, then I think it, hopefully that portrays a bigger, or gives a bigger picture. The other thing is the issue with children, not having children in school. I mean, I'm in that category now, even though all my kids went through Provo public schools. I think if we can somehow figure out a way to tap into people's communal investment, because again, this is a financial issue. I mean, if a community decides they're not going to fund public education, we're going to pay for it in terms of crime and in terms of delinquency and all kinds of social problems if we don't invest in public education. So if I'm 80 years old or I'm 50 or I'm 35, you know, and I do or don't have kids, it's still in the community's self-interest to invest in good public schools. And I know that's, again, sort of lofty idealism, but I think if we can capture that imagination a little bit better with people who don't have kids, maybe there are a lot of people like me whose kids already went through the program, and I certainly feel that tug. I mean, I certainly feel a responsibility to Wasatch, even though my kids have long since left that school, and Timpview, even though they've left that school a long time ago, because I want other people's kids to have those experiences. I mean, I think most people have those instincts. It's just that sometimes they don't, you know, it's like they don't connect the dots a little bit, and there's this narrowing self-interest that kicks in when it comes to, you know, money. But I think the longer term picture and the bigger picture is this is actually more financially sensible if as Provo's identity is about, you know, really, really good public schools in perpetuity. Whether or not my kids are there or not is irrelevant. It's about this community's pride in itself and our identity. I just hope people will listen to that message. Anyway, I'm preaching to a very, very willing choir. So
I second George's thought on the money. You need to be really black and white with that old bond, what it would have been, what we paid, the difference, the interest, get all the numbers there.
Real fast, I just want to clarify, not only for those in the room, but the public who might be watching. We're talking a lot right now about Timpview, but these public meetings will also focus a lot on that Dixon property. That's a really important area for our community, for that neighborhood, for that whole side of town. We have other needs as a district that could be utilized. Like, we can utilize that property for those needs. And so these community nights, we are going to be talking about both of those, and we do want this to be a community conversation about how we can address the needs at both sites. So,
Becky?
My comment is, where I'm from, it's not necessarily that you have the money to make a choice on which car you want. You usually have to get the one that's in your affordability range. And a lot of our people here in Provo are in that kind of pinch. We have older people, we have people starting out, they just don't have a whole lot of money. And so it doesn't matter how much you could appeal to their sense of community, they just don't have the money to give. So I think you're going to have to look at this as, you know, and a lot of people, even they'll say, okay, I do this with my home. I have a home that was built in the 1940s. Why can't you keep your school in the same kind of condition that I keep my home? So I think you also need to look at it as these people, a lot of them, it's a choice between medicine and food or taxes. And so you're going to have to be really sensitive with, these are the bonds that we are paying off so that we can turn around and reinvest this money into our schools. Because a lot of them just don't have the money to care what kind of car they have. They just need transportation to go back and forth.
And we're very sensitive to that. You know, I met with our bank last week to talk about our options to make sure that taxes are not going to go up. And that's one of my biggest, the rates for the debt service bond. It's based on the payments that we need to make. And so we're working really hard to make sure that the way that it is structured does not increase what people would be paying more than what they are currently paying. And we'll show some of that in the community meeting. But thank you for that.
So would that argue for a 4-year approach than a shorter?
There are a lot of positives about both of them and a lot of negatives about both of them. You know, I think that I'm speaking for everyone on the board, maybe a little too early, but I think all of us would be really happy to be done with construction on Timpview, you know, because we know that the pain points have been pretty big for families, and they've made a lot of sacrifices, and it's been difficult. But our number one priority is the students and making sure that they have a safe place to go to school, and where our high schools have continued to grow, where our elementary schools have decreased in enrollment, that is a big need. So there are arguments financially for going with the extended, because you can waterfall the issuing of the bonds, which it is a positive, because we do have a bond falling off here in another couple of years, and that is one of the things that we're looking at.
So real quickly, before we move on to the next item on number 5, I just want to be clear with our dates for our community meetings. We would love to have any and all of you attend, and we would love to hear all the opinions and all the feedback we can get. Go ahead.
Just have Jennifer send those to us in an email.
Okay, we can get those to you, Jennifer. They'll come out on postcards as well, but it'll be coming up soon, the 1st, 6th, 15th, and 16th of May, so keep that in mind.
First one is next Wednesday.
Can I just clarify, so you're planning on 4 public meetings?
Just to start.
For now.
For now.
This is just to start.
Because it seems like this should be a conversation, not
Absolutely.
a two-way dialogue, not a one-way conversation.
Absolutely.
And if we were to bond to pay for this, we would have to decide by March of next year. So this is not something that's going to be decided in the next 2 weeks or even 2 months. It will be a long conversation.
And we had 2 meetings already over at Dixon, and the way that Superintendent Dow structured them, it was a conversation. So she first presented, like, here are some of our capital needs in general as a district. Here are some, like, ideas and things that we have. We want to hear from you. Like, you who are neighbors of Dixon School, you right here, as this building, as students leave this building, what are your concerns? What are your ideas? But first, here's a frame of some of the things on our mind, right? And it was so then amazing to see how many people got up to the mic, spoke, some brought really thought out ideas, some were just like thinking of ideas and up to share them. And so that was the format for those first 2 meetings, and they were site specific to the future of Dixon, because we need to start that conversation. This conversation has to happen in the context of the next thing on here, which is a boundary study, which is how well are we using the facilities we already have. Like, there's a lot of information we need before we make a decision that I feel like we could say to the public shows that we have been the best possible stewards with what we have. But the public has to be in that conversation all the way along, right? Because we don't have the information they have. We don't know all of unintended consequences of things. We know different people are going to have concerns and good ideas for how to solve some things. So this is just a conversation start, in a sense of saying, we want this on everyone's radar right now. We want to start having conversations right now. The more we over communicate, by the time we get to a suggested plan, the more easily we can tell that story to people, and the more we feel like people will have informed that plan, so that it's actually well thought through, well written, and we can back it with clear explanations of what we've done with the resources we have otherwise. Does that make sense?
Rachel, did you have something?
I'll let it go on time.
Okay, great. Any further comments or questions regarding the community nights? Okay, let's move on to that's the second item, which Lisa just introduced for us, which is our boundary study. So by way of information, we've directed our superintendent and our business administrator to go ahead and start an RFP process to look into a consultant to do a boundary study for our school district. So the last time we did one was in 2006, definitely do. And just as Lisa has stated here, we want to make sure we're using all of our resources as efficiently as possible. And one of the ways we can do that is by making sure our boundaries are good, they're functioning correctly, their distribution of resources is correct through our schools, through how many students we have everywhere, et cetera. And so we plan to start the process to look into that and then have that done. This is a similar thing. This is going to be a long process, right? So we won't have results for this for probably a year. I don't know how long it takes, but it's probably going to be about a year before we have any kind of results. We figure it'll be something similar. I don't know if you paid attention to the recent boundary study for Alpine School District, where they're talking about possibly splitting, and the way their study came back with different suggestions on how that could be done. That's what we're looking at for our boundaries. So,
But we're not talking about splitting.
we're not, for the record, we're not.
Clarify.
Yeah, to clarify, and I want to be very clear too, we do not have any preconceived plans to close schools. This is not with anything like that in mind. This is really just to make sure we're using our resources efficiently and to get some recommendations on things we can do better, and how it can help our school district function better. So, any questions? Go ahead.
First of all, the mayor wanted me to recognize that she was unable to make it, and she apologizes. But I'm wondering if will this help at all in you guys figuring out if you can start accessing those Sundance homes that use the Provo School District?
So,
That's our next one.
yeah, our next item is kind of about, I met with the Alpine superintendent and the business administrator quite a few months ago, and they are totally on board with making sure that our boundaries are aligning properly. And so part of this is we had a business administrator change. So as that occurs, we're working with our attorney to get all of the paperwork drawn up for that, and then Alpine is on board with supporting us with that. Then our next step is to meet with NEBO. So we're hopeful.
That's great. And then we also have on item number 5, the safe routes to the new schools item. So who's planning to take that?
Just gonna check with them if there's anything.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I mean, I can share information I have about Wasatch. I would like to say the city engineers have been really fantastic in working with the safety committee at Wasatch, and I know they have been meeting to kind of go over the Safe Route Committee's recommendations. You know, they've really been, the parents in that committee have really been thoughtful of how, thinking about all the kids coming from the different locations to the new school site there. There are, you know, some pain points, I guess. You know, 1450 East has come up. It's the street right above the new site. Kahan and Vern with the city. Kahan was able to secure a CBD grant. I always get the initials. CBDG. For the Oak Cliff, it's that really steep street. But the concern is they're going to be doing improvements there. But above that, there's some sidewalks missing on 1450. And the safety committee would really like, there needs to be a crosswalk on 1450. Ideally, like a couple, to get kids, you know, from the Oak Hills area down across 1450, and then they can access the new Oak Cliffs area down to the site. The problem is it's tricky to get crosswalks when it's not ADA, right? The city's reluctant to do a crosswalk if you're not going to enter into a safely ADA spot, right? So, but I think right now the plan is to have at least one crosswalk on 1450, and the engineers are going to figure out how they can make that happen. I think outside of that, for us as a board, having to think about, depending the timeline of any improvements on 1450, right? Like that Oak Hills is going to not have they will lose their bus. So, you know, what does that look like? Is it safe for the kids to go down that way? So that's the report on Wasatch that I'm aware of. Maybe Wendy, you know more.
Yeah, so I know Meg met with Assistant Superintendent Jared Seitz to talk about some of these issues, and we're going to talk about it in board meeting on Tuesday to look at are there potentially what we would consider like hazardous areas where we need to implement some busing there, even though it's outside of the state's parameters of the 1.5 miles. And so Troy Lindloff will be presenting at the board meeting to kind of talk through that, and then the board can make some decisions about what they want to do. I think there's some push to have that be similar to kind of what we did with Shoreline, where we're busing different areas because of just the location and making sure that students are safe. So we're continuing those discussions.
Okay. Any questions there? All right. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 6. We'll now have a discussion regarding our school district budgeting and financing, including the Provo areas that have been in Alpine and Nebo school district boundaries. So we kind of touched on that a little. Do you have more to add, Devin?
You know, we have 4 minutes. So
2 technically, according to my watch.
2 minutes. So maybe I'll take any questions about the district budgeting process or finances that you may have questions about, rather than giving you. I have hours I could talk about budget, and so
She loves money.
I do. Well, it's not money. I love numbers, and
Oh,
so
that's
I love making the numbers work. I wish there was more money to make the numbers work a little bit better. But are there any questions specific to our budget that you're wondering? I think we've addressed a little bit of it with every single topic on the agenda, so I think some of it may be a rehash, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
And we're doing a large budget discussion at board meeting on April 30th to kind of go through some of the preliminary pieces and really explaining kind of the financial. We've already started talking about the financial state of the district and trying to help educate people why there's been why it feels like there's all of a sudden this reduction in resources available and what that looks like and kind of what our plans are moving forward. So that will be a very thorough discussion on Tuesday.
And I think I can address, Wendy did say I would address in the meeting the federal revenue. So one of the issues that we've had over the years, first of all, was our decrease in enrollment from a few years ago when we got rid of our e-school providers that were bringing in a few thousand students. At that same time, there were a lot of things that we should have done with the budget that we didn't need to, because number one, we were trying to react to the COVID pandemic and make sure that students had all of what they needed to make sure that there wasn't any additional learning loss and that we were providing those extra resources. And so we started getting that funding and were able to keep some of those programs going that were just temporary. And I think anybody is aware that anytime you take a temporary program a little longer than what the original temporary was, it feels like it's becoming more permanent. And that was the case with a lot of the instructional assistants that were provided. Most of those instructional assistants were paid for from that ESSER funding. And so that just this year, we'll have a $9 million decrease in federal funding with just a $4 million increase in state funding. And so when you look at the state legislature only providing a 5% increase, and that includes their inflationary amount that they determine is what inflation is, and when we have an 11.5% increase in insurance costs and additional construction. You mentioned how much more expensive construction is, and not just the construction, but also the basic maintenance of our buildings, and the additional challenge with making sure that we have really well-trained, well-paid teachers. And the budgetary restrictions have made it so we're a little bit further behind some of our neighbors, and that's because they have a lot more of a base revenue with their property taxes, and they have less of their per student administrative costs may be a little lower because they have 100,000 students and we have 13,000. And so, but we still are statutorily required to have a lot of the positions that we have in place. And so it feels, I know a lot of people get frustrated with the administrative costs and things that are required, but they are legally required to have. And so we're trying to work within our parameters with an incredible focus on making sure that the impact to taxpayers is not too burdensome, and making sure that we're looking at resources that are available so that we can really make well-timed and good decisions based on what we need, because everybody I think can agree, especially those who've had students come through the schools, that a good teacher makes the biggest difference in our students, and making sure that we can keep those teachers is really is our biggest priority. So that being said, any other questions specific to our budget?
And I would love to hear from city council members, questions you hear, or just frustrations or things you hear with your constituents. I mean, if you're repeatedly hearing a narrative about distrust around something financial related to our schools, I think it'd be so helpful if you would tell us that, so that we know that and we can look into answers and make sure that we have the communication we need to correct misinformation and to provide background information into where we are financially.
Right. It's a lot easier to get a splinter out when it first gets in rather than waiting forever and letting it fester. So, yes, any questions?
I can add one quick one, which I know I've talked to Meg and others about, but the wall at Wasatch continues to create a lot of narrative among people about why the wall was necessary, why is it so expensive, what was this wasteful. So I think that narrative is moving faster than you guys probably can contain it, but that's
and maybe
one that I
maybe
that I'm
a statement
lot.
from our engineers, because the engineer is the one who
right.
made the requirement. This is what we needed to be able to have a structurally sound building. I know that I've heard the wall. I've heard it called the Great Wall of Provo.
Right.
And
yeah.
so,
just as an anecdotal example, I got a text just yesterday from a citizen who said, I have asked many people and I keep getting different answers, and I thought maybe you would have an answer. And of course I was like, well, I don't really have the answer either. And then I gave him Meg's name, and of course Meg and I were just talking right before the meeting. It's like, well, we're also not engineers, so when we make a decision to say yes to something that's been proposed to us at the council and it's coming from our engineers or from somebody else, they're in the best position to explain it. That's why having an engineer like Vern who's willing to talk to the public is incredible, because a lot of times we end up getting things, criticism that we can't even respond to because we don't have the expertise to be able to respond to it. So I think that's a fantastic idea.
correct. I am not an engineer. I can talk about budget all day, but you put a wall in front of me, I'm not going to know how deep it needs to be or what structural requirements there are. So we could definitely get some statements from the engineer and from the architect about the reasoning and what the process was to have that, and that would be super helpful. Becky?
Go ahead.
I don't think it's just the wall. I think that's great to have an engineering explanation about it. It's so prison looking. And it's an elementary school. And I took my husband up there, and he's an elementary school teacher. And he's an elementary school teacher in Alpine, and he was just in awe. He was just like, how awful is this going to be on recess duty and see this gray wall? He's like, those kids are never going to leave. Those kids are in prison and they can't escape. And so I think it's also important to just look at it from that kind of perspective and relate to the public about how you're going to make it more kid-friendly and not more prison-like.
Correct, and we were warned it would start looking more like a prison before it would get its final beautiful facade. We've seen pictures of what it's going to look like.
That's the school
She's
itself.
talking the walls.
Yeah.
Yes, the school, and that's what I'm talking about, is the
She's
school
talking about
itself.
the walls.
Oh, you're talking about the wall looking like a prison, not the school?
The whole thing looks like a prison. My husband's like, where's the playground going to be? What are they going to be staring at? They're going to be staring at a wall. Are they going to, he goes, how are you going to keep those kids from climbing the wall? It's just, he's like, are they going to paint it kid-friendly? Are they going to have
We've had
murals?
lots of conversations.
So I think something like that of letting people know, hey, this is going to be an elementary school, and this is how we're going to fix the circumstance that we have so it'll be a beautiful school and not a prison for children. I think that might help the conversation as well.
Just get landscaping, grass.
The exterior of
gonna
the
look a
building
lot
will make it
If you
really
have a
nice.
construction update place, you can go online and you can sign up to get construction newsletters, and I feel like the more we get the word out about that, the better. But also any pictures, I'm always like, show me what that's gonna look like when it's done. You know what I mean? And it's hard
Put
because
it right on site.
yeah, no one wants to commit sometimes to something if they're not sure, but maybe something like this and a picture, just some pictures of like, we're aware of these concerns. I think that would be a helpful ad for us to do, but then also so that you're aware, anyone who asks questions about construction for Shoreline, for Wasatch, and for the Timpview site, to direct them to our construction website. And
Correct.
maybe,
Yep.
is that
And-
just linkable
and-
from our
yep,
regular
that's
website?
it's on the regular
But
website.
that's
yep.
not, it's not really, I looked at that before I started asking Terry and Meg questions, right? That's not really descriptive, and that's not really, it doesn't really look like an elementary school even in those pictures. It looks really, really daunting and prison-like.
We need to work on renderings and getting
Yep.
a sign out front.
Yep, sure.
Okay. I just want to Well, any other questions for Devin regarding item number 6? Okay, item number 7, in the interest of time, is just additional questions or anything like that. I'm going to add 2 quick things and then open it up to anyone else who has the time to stay. I apologize for not doing this at the beginning. I should have done this at the beginning, but I want to welcome all of our new faces that we have at this meeting. We have several new faces, so I wanted to introduce you officially to Devin Daly, who is our new business administrator, and then welcome to Becky and Gary and Craig for the first time at our joint meeting. So thank you for being here and welcome. And then the last thing I wanted to add real quickly is this coming Monday, the 29th at 6 p.m., we're having a celebration at Dixon Middle School to honor the school before we vacate it. And so we would love to have you. I know your calendars are as full as our calendars, and I know adding in another event is a little bit tricky, but if you have time this Monday, the 29th, starting at 6 p.m., we're going to honor that school before we vacate it, and there will be a celebration there. So we would love to invite you to that and make sure you're aware of that. Are there any further comments, questions, anything else anybody would like to add? Okay, well, this has been a great meeting.
Well,
Thank you so much.
I
Oh,
just
Jennifer,
real fast.
Just kidding.
Okay, it's just going to be a comment that would have been a question, but so for our next meeting, I would just love to hear more what the city council, we talked about like 2 of the things on your radar, but I'm sure you guys are working on so many different things, and I don't know about the rest of the board, but my head is so down into the work of the school board that I'm not able to watch your meetings and stay on top of all that. And so I would just love to hear some of the big things that you guys are working on, your successes and your concerns and things like that.
Normally, we don't spend so much time talking about dog poop.
Us either.
Housing,
Unfortunately, we
the
have
housing
to.
challenges that the city faces, that's a big initiative for us. Obviously, figuring out how to be responsible with taxpayer dollars. Sidewalks is a huge initiative, public safety, active transportation. We have specific niche issues like, you know, the bridge at 820 North and 800 North, right? And which direction that's going to go and how many lanes will that be? And but yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just give you a kind of a broader perspective of the sorts of things that are on our agendas and such would be great.
I know one thing that we really want to work on is being more educated on the RDA and getting that in a more functional place where it's doing more good in the city. And I know that's something that we, join with you on, anything that we do through the RDA. So that's something that we're actively working on getting more educated on and trying to use it more skillfully and productively in the city to go towards home ownership, which would benefit the schools, and, build in areas where infrastructure is an issue.
On that quick note, we recently passed a new policy regarding RDAs and just kind of outlining some of our qualifications and things we will consider whenever entertaining an RDA. Would that be helpful to the council to have that information?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get that sent to you. We are actually even already thinking about amending a couple things on there, but it's a newer thing for us. We wanted to be very clear on our standards for when we will and won't approve RDAs. So we'll get that to you to make sure you have that in your study.
Thank you.
As far as meetings go, I feel like these go so fast and we don't have a chance to talk that much, but I know, and I believe it was at the city's request or the council's request that we only have 2 meetings per year, which is fine with me, but it feels to me like we had a lot more that we need to talk about. So I don't know what needs to happen for us to take a look at that. I'm fine. I don't enjoy meetings usually. I mean, this was wonderful. The lunch was great. But
What about increasing the time of our 2 meetings a year?
Yeah, I would certainly support. An hour allows for a download, but not the reciprocal upload.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, what about twice a year we do it for 2 hours?
Or an hour and a half.
I think that would be a lot more effective. It's always felt extremely rushed.
One thing I just wanted to add, last night we met in our final community strategic planning meeting. Our district has been going through this process of developing a strategic plan, and I just wanted to share with you the narrative that has been continuous throughout around the fact that we are so lucky to be one city, one district, and because we actually can be the best city and district in the state. I think there's actually nothing holding us back, but except maybe the work we have to do and hard decisions and better collaboration. And last night when we were talking through like mission and vision and priorities and all of that, I just want you to know that what kept coming up was making sure we are community-based. We are partnering with our city to create something really special for our students as well as for our residents and where we live. And so just as we're looking at these meetings going forward, I just wanted to share with you that that was teachers, there were business owners, there were other types of civic leaders that have been part of that planning committee for our district. And that has been just really top of mind for everyone. Like, how do we make sure that the city and the schools are doing something special, because we have all these resources right here to do it. We just need to make sure we're really collaborating and messaging together around what we're doing.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you so much.